Thank you for tuning in to this important program on teen violence. I'm Attorney General Deborah Poritz. In recent years, New Jersey has seen a rise in serious and violent juvenile crime. Kids are killing kids at a chilling rate in New Jersey and across the country, sometimes over nothing more than a pair of sneakers. Confronting the problem of teen violence is a top priority of law enforcement. At stake is nothing less than our safety and our future. The town meeting you will see will bring into clear focus the issue of teen violence.
Stop the violence! Word up, word up! Stop the violence! Word up, word up! Stop the violence! Word up, word up! Stop the violence! Word up! Once again, NJN, it's time to stop all the violence. Time to walk straight and erase all the riots. Man, you need to check yourself, then respect yourself before you wreck yourself. Word up!
Automatic weapons of destruction in the hands of 10-year-olds. Over 3,500 teen gang-related murders in one single year. Entire communities terrorized by youth violence. New Jersey, 5th in the nation in teen arrests for serious crimes. Scenes unimaginable 20 years ago are a reality today. Hello, my name is Miguel Perez, your host for Word Up, Stop the Violence, an NJN television special, a town hall meeting seeking peaceful solutions to an epidemic of crime and violence. With us today are teens and adults who will share their experiences in a dialogue that will strive to reach an understanding. We are honored to present our two distinguished guests, the Governor of New Jersey, Christine Todd Whitman, and the acclaimed star of stage and screen, Edward James Olmos. Welcome to the show. Governor, let's begin with you. According to the State Juvenile Delinquent Commission, 89,000 juveniles were arrested in 1992. In 1993, 37% of the juveniles arrested for violent crimes. In the first half of 1994, 41% arrested for crimes ranging from assault to murder. What kind of an impact does this have on the people of the state of New Jersey?
Well, you know, it has an ongoing, incredible impact on the people of this state and the people of the nation. I mean, when teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19 face the fact that the second leading cause of death, right behind auto accidents, is gun violence, when it's #1 among African American males, that tells you we're paying a terrible price in society. And the thing that people don't understand, when young people have a life expectancy of 16, it's pretty hard to get them to buy into the future. And it gets even more difficult when they feel that the only way to respond to a situation is violence, because that's what they see around them. That's the easy way to deal with a problem. And that means that they just carry it on, and it goes on and on. We must deal with this problem now because we all pay for it, not just today, but we pay for it tomorrow and the year after and in the years to come. And our children will pay for it and our children's children. It's time to focus on this issue now. It's why we are looking at our juvenile justice system throughout this entire state to see how can we offer services to people, to young people particularly, earlier. How can we help them understand their worth, that they have the ability to be leaders right now, that they are role models, they can be mentors for other children, young people, to help them not get into lives of violence. It is something that we have to start to focus on, and it's something we're trying to do here, and I'm delighted at this program because that will help focus the attention and the dialogue on what needs to be done and what can be done.
Shortly after you took office, you convened a summit of experts back in February of 1994, and they suggested a lot of possible solutions, or at least ideas on how this problem was dealt with in other states. What has happened since? What is your administration doing to combat teen crime?
Well, what they've done is, so far, they've only given me the interim report. The final report is going to be coming at the end of this month. And there are a number of recommendations, but we took some of them right away. The first one we did is we lifted something that we had called confidentiality laws as they applied to juveniles in this state, which really prevented anybody from sharing information about a juvenile who committed a crime. And it meant that in the worst of cases, when you had this happened, we had one juvenile who was being sought for a homicide, for a murder. One city, he committed the crime in one city, they knew he was in another, but they couldn't, one police department couldn't tell the other to try to find him, so he was out there committing other crimes, fortunately no other capital crimes, but committing other crimes. We didn't have the ability to share information, to my mind more importantly, between social service organizations and schools and police, to know when a young person was starting to really get in trouble. When an act in school suddenly wasn't just one act, it in fact followed a pattern of what the police had seen on the outside or what social service agencies had seen with the schools. Now they can share that information and start to focus in on young people earlier when they're just starting to get in trouble. The red flag goes up and we say, all right, now we need to pay more attention to what we can do for this family and for this young person. We've started with that. Another important thing that we've done is we've established schools for violent juveniles who are acting out in the classroom, not to the point where they need to be involved with the court of law, but where they are certainly disrupting a teacher's ability to teach and other students' ability to learn. But we've said you don't want to just remove them from the classroom. That isn't good enough. The worst thing in the world is to leave them on the street with no structure, with nobody watching out for them or working with them. So we're developing alternate schools and places to put them where they will get attention, where they will have to meet some standards, they will have to come to school, they will have to perform, but they're also getting the help that they need.
It's also, of course, impacting even more at the local level, especially in the urban centers. And with us today, there's someone here who can tell us all about that, the mayor of Trenton, Mayor Palmer, Doug Palmer of the capital of New Jersey. Mayor Palmer, please tell us about how this impacts on city neighborhoods. What does it do to a city neighborhood?
Well, certainly it helps deteriorate neighborhoods. It reduces morale. And one of the biggest problems that we have in the city of Trenton and other cities across America is we're trying to bring investments into the city. We're trying to work in bringing jobs to young people who would like to have jobs. We're trying to get people to invest back into the cities. When you have the perception, which is even stronger than the reality, of crime and violence in cities and neighborhoods, that reduces investments. There's not a day that goes by that young people don't come to me and say, Mayor Palmer, I need a job, help me get a job. Or even in Trenton, we don't have a movie theater in the city. Wanting to bring entertainment and investment and jobs into the city. So
not only bringing them in, but also driving them out.
Well, it's driving them out too. But you know, I'd also like to say this, and I'm glad that you're having this program, because when we talk about violence, teen violence, you're involving young people, because they are not the problem. They can be the solution. And by listening to them and people realizing that these young people are affected even to a greater degree than we are because of their safety every day, it helps people know that the people in my city, for instance, less than 1% of young people in my city steal cars, commit crimes. So we have to go after that segment that are leaders in the community to get them behind this movement to say that violence is totally unacceptable.
Thank you, Mayor. With us today also we have a doctor who sees this from a different perspective, from the emergency room perspective, Dr. Louis Faris. Thank you for being with us, doctor. You are the president of the Mercer County Medical Association. Tell us from your perspective, from that hospital emergency room, how you see teen violence.
I see teen violence in the worst possible light. I see young men and women, the suffering that they go through. And not only them, but their relatives and their friends. And probably the worst thing that I have to do is talk to a parent afterwards to let them know that their loved one is dead. To talk to their friends and tell them that that young life has ceased. Where is the rhyme and reason about that? It makes no sense whatsoever. And then, of course, when they don't die, the permanency of the disfigurements, the rehabilitation they have to go through, just so much, it doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Olmos, you've been on a personal crusade for quite a few years now on talking to youths around the country. You've done a couple of movies relating to gang violence. So I'd just like an overview of what you've seen. Tell us about, you must have 1,000 stories to tell, but just give us a quick recap of how serious this situation is from your perspective as a movie maker.
Let me just say that before I go too far in this, because it gets to be very, very difficult to understand sometimes, and the numbers are overwhelming. For instance, that in the United States of America, 91% of all the violent crime in the world is perpetrated in this country. So with these kind of statistics, you kind of have to hold on. You have to really realize what's going on in the system. So before I start into that, I'd like to just say one thing. We are talking about a minority, a small group of individual youth that are considered very, very violent. And this violence is spreading. The majority of the youth today are the most effective youth we've ever had. They're trying hard to hold up with hope when the adult itself doesn't have that much hope. And they're doing well, very well. So let's get that straight before we go into the downward spiral that we have to go into, because violence is growing, and it's growing very quickly. That's why we're doing this. 22 years ago, when I started to understand this problem, when I was researching American Me, a film that was just out a couple of years ago, I started to notice that the random drive-by shootings between gang members was escalating, and there was maybe 12, 13 drive-by shootings in Los Angeles County. In Los Angeles County in 1986, just the county of Los Angeles, there were 11 drive-by deaths, gang-related shootings. And by 1990, that had escalated to 692. By 1991, there were 771 in that year killed. There were 800 killed in 1992. Thank God in 1993, the Crips and the Bloods decided not to kill each other anymore, and only 1,000 kids were killed. So you see the incredible evolutionary process. And that's one of the things that we've been observing. It's the evolvement of the good in us, our evolvement as a society and the humanness of us and all our technologies and all the great things that we stand for and that we are, and also the evolvement of the bad part of us. That evolvement of the negative side is growing, and it is strong, and it has evolved to a new type of warfare. When I was a young boy in the gangs on the street, we did not have guns. We didn't have them. We would settle everything with our fists, our hands, but it was still violent. Today, the same violence is perpetrated even further by the fact that there are now guns in the hands of juveniles. And one of the issues that's strongest is understanding, and this is the hardest part, this is the part we've had the most problem in getting the society as a whole to take into consideration. And that is, violence is not a judicial problem. It is a health problem. I say that to you the same way I would say to you, polio is a health problem. It's not a judicial problem. Violence is as much, you can ask a doctor, is as much a cancer in the soul and the mind as typhoid, smallpox, AIDS, polio. We don't wait to start we don't wait for our children to get polio before we start to vaccinate for polio. We start vaccinating for polio at 3 months old. And yet we allow our children to exhibit violence before we start to say, oh, wait a minute, there's a problem here. No, violence is a learned behavior. I've never seen one child come out of its mother's womb with a pistol in its hand.
The danger of children with guns was fully illustrated in Edward James Olmos's film American Me. He used real-life gang members as actors. In 1992, Olmos released a follow-up documentary film called Lives in Hazard. This movie traces the lives of gang members who had appeared in American Me. Many of them had made positive changes in their lives, while others had continued their gang activities and were incarcerated, paralyzed, or killed. The producer of Lives in Hazard was Daniel Haro.
Violence is not a young person's problem, it's an adult problem. Because again, people under 18 in this country are powerless to make decisions. Decisions are made for them by adults. And if we ask our kids to act like adults, walk like adults, think like adults, don't be surprised if they do violence like adults. So I think it's real important that as an adult, it's my responsibility that the world is in the state that it's in. But at the same time, it's my responsibility to make a change, as it is for all of us, adult as well as young person, to make that change.
Trying to make a change are victims of gunfire at New York's Goldwater Memorial Hospital. They call their group Power. 2 of their members brought a message for all of us. Tell us your name and tell us what happened to you.
Well, my name is Wilson Murphy, and I was caught in a shootout, a drive-by shootout. I was going to the store. I was a maintenance man at my job, and I worked in a drug-infested neighborhood. And what we must realize, whether you deal drugs or you don't have no dealings with drugs, if you're in a drug-infested neighborhood, If your community is drug invested, then your life is at risk. And I'm a perfect example. Now, this guy stopped me, a neighborhood drug user, and he asked me, he said, Wilson, can I borrow $2? I'm the type, if I give you $2 to keep me from hurting you, or you hurting me, it's a small price to pay for my life. So before I can tell this man that I didn't have it, or come and see me later, a car rolled by. 4 guys got out the car, and the car pulled up, and the guys that got out the car had Uzis. So like I'm standing there at the corner, I see one of the guys walk around me, but I'm not paying him no mind because I don't have no problem with nobody in the street. And next thing I know, a friend, my co-worker, he said, look out, Wilson, they got guns. Before I knew it, my reaction was to run. And when I ran, I tripped over the guy's foot that they were looking for. This guy had a price on his head. So if you standing next to somebody that has a price on his head, there's a price on your head. I was shot 7 times with an Uzi and a 9mm. And I think what kids need to know is that they need to know the repercussions behind the bullet. Because we look at Terminator, we look at Rambo. This guy, Rambo, I remember when I first seen Rambo, this guy, he got shot, he runs up a tree, he pulls the bullet out his back. How he did that, I don't know. And he sews himself up in the tree. And where he got the needle and thread from, I don't know. All right, but then he goes back out and he commits the fight.
That's not real life.
This is reality. I think what the governor, the mayor, what they should do is fund a program to show behind the bullet. Show the rehabilitation program. Show what the patient go through. Now, when I call my daughter Brittany is 4 years old. Sometimes I don't even call her. When I call her and she say, Daddy, are you walking yet? I can't lie to her and say, no, I'm not. So then when I say, I can't lie to her and say, yes, I'm walking when I'm not.
Right.
So when I tell her no, she drops the phone. And I asked her mother, I said, where she's at? She's over there sitting down. I had an operation on my feet. I couldn't wear shoes for 3 years. My feet were so contracted. They twisted on me. This is from the bullet that hit me in the head. You know, now, I can forgive these perpetrators for shooting me, but you know what I can't forgive? I can't forgive after I was down on that ground fighting for my life. That perpetrator came and shot me in my head, close range. He tried to take the most important thing away from me with my life. But you know, I had God watching over me, and I'm still here.
Bravo. Thank you, Wilson. Your name is Nestor, right?
Yes.
Tell us what happened to you, Nestor.
Well, I also was shot 7 times. I was hanging out with a group of kids, and one of the kids had an idea of hijacking drug dealers. But at the time, I didn't know them really well, so I didn't know what they were involved in. And they went on and they did their thing. And somehow the drug dealers found out who the guys were. So when they came back, I was going home, and my friends and I, we were together at the time. And all of a sudden, maybe a minute later, this guy came out of nowhere, and he pulled out his gun, and he asked who Mike was. And maybe afterwards, he didn't care who he was, and he just started shooting everybody. He shot me 7 times. He shot my friend in the heart once, and instantly killed him. He shot my other friend twice. And Mike, the guy that he came for, he somehow got away, you know. But this individual who shot me, he didn't know that we are all human beings, that we all have feelings, and that, you know, even though we make it through the bullet, you know, we have to go through so much hurt, you know. And I don't really care about my feelings, but the family feelings, the people who are really hurting, you know.
How did this affect your family? Tell us about that.
Well, my family and we have a strong bond, but it really affected them emotionally, you know, because now my mother, you know, she's bugged out, you know, she loves me, you know, and to see a son go through what I'm going through, you know, it really hurts, you understand? And this individual, he doesn't have the common sense, and he didn't have the understanding that, you know, when you take a life, you're taking hopes and dreams and everything that you hope for, you know, and that's what we got to get through these kids, that you know, we're all human beings. We're trying to achieve something, you know, and just because you pull that trigger doesn't make you a bigger man. You know, it make you less of a man because you don't have the respect of life, because life is precious. And I think that's my message to the kids out there.
Thank you very much. How does one react to something like that, to testimony like the one we've heard? It's very difficult to even deal with it, I'm sure. I see that you are very emotional already, Mr. Olmos. Governor, you too. I can see it in your faces that this is the kind of thing perhaps that we should, this kind of message is the message that we should be taking out there.
It's one of the best ways to deliver a message is for people who have the courage that these two young men have, having been through what they've been through, to face it every day and be willing to talk about it publicly. Because that does get a message. You talk in a language that others can understand. When adults try to lecture kids, we don't get the message across nearly as effectively as someone who's been there and seen it. And you're living proof, fortunately you're living, but you're proof of what happens, as you say, behind the bullet.
But this is what we do. The shirt I wear says people, it says power. It stands for people opening the world's eyes to reality. We are the people, they are the world. This is reality.
The best way that we have found to curb the problems that we're faced with today has been through what Power is doing, okay, and there's 12 individuals that have been injured in violent crime, and they go around to the high schools, and I highly recommend that all of New Jersey start calling in on Power. Power should be in every single high school, in every single junior high, in every grammar school in this state. They should be the most working individuals of any individual group ever mounted. They're the most effective way to allow people to understand what we're talking about. That's one. Second thing is a mentoring system. Mentoring. When college students, when we found in communities where college students have turned around and helped junior high students get through their junior high and head into high school, and where we've had high school students help grammar school students get through grammar school into junior high, we found the best results. One-on-one situation is the best. That doesn't mean you do anything other than just allow yourself to be a friend to this other individual.
We ought to start understanding that everybody has something to give, no matter where you are in life, what station you are in life, you have something to give somebody else. And if you recognize your own worth and your ability to reach out, that you have something special about you, whether it's in academics or the way you've been brought up or what it is, you have something to give, and we ought to start accessing that more and encouraging it more and being more conscious about saying, there's a role for you. You may not be a rocket scientist, as everyone likes to talk about, but the world isn't made up of them, and it's not going to be a better place if everybody is nothing but rocket scientists. We want everybody.
Governor, your Commissioner of Human Services is here, William Waldman, and perhaps he can add to this conversation. Commissioner, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Miguel. It's indeed a delight to be here. This is an incredible issue for us. My view is it is the future. We have the responsibility today of caring for about 750 youngsters in the state who have gotten involved with the juvenile justice program. And as the governor indicated, we are working in a task force that's cross-cut at many of the disciplines, both in healthcare and in areas that have a bearing, a stake in this, to come together and present to the governor soon a blueprint how we may revise the system in the state of New Jersey of juvenile justice. And I think that some of the services that were talked about, things like mentoring and others, will be key, very key components of it. And I think that the idea that everyone has a role is emerged through the process of discussion, that it is not just the healthcare professionals or the social work professionals or the police or the courts, but it's all of us that have a role.
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Everyone has a responsibility here.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
With us also is Christopher Kilbourne, who is heads a team of reporters, I should say my colleague from the Bergen Record, Christopher Kilbourne, who heads a team of reporters that has done a year-long investigation of juvenile justice in the state of New Jersey. And I want you, Chris, please sum up, if you can, what are some of your major findings?
Well, as you said, we undertook a year-long investigation, and we found a system that had problems that had been welling up for years, and it really reached a crisis stage. We found a badly fragmented system where officials weren't even tracking programs that get millions of dollars each year to see whether or not they were effective. We found a system where unequal justice is meted out based upon the resources of various jurisdictions. We found that minority juveniles were being jailed at a rate 4 times greater than white juveniles, even when they were charged with similar offenses. We found that the state's major training school was dilapidated and bursting basically at the seams. County detention centers were overcrowded. And we found the state basically had no programs or even facilities for female offenders. We've seen some very positive signs in the last year.
That was my question. There has been improvement.
There has. I mean, we have a governor that we know is committed to this from her background in the National Council for Crime and Delinquency. We've seen all these studies launched. We've seen the study that Commissioner Waldman referred to and others. We've seen some legislation that you mentioned earlier, lifting some of the confidentiality of the system. But we've also seen some troubling signs, too. I mean, even as these studies have been going on, we've seen juvenile violence continue to escalate. We've seen the minority overrepresentation in the back end of the system continue to increase. We've seen, even though $8 million has been set aside to improve the state's major training school for juveniles, no significant work and construction has been done there yet. And one troubling thing, too, is that all of these studies that are going on, one of the major ones has been conducted really behind closed doors. And some of the other studies that have been completed have not yet been released to the press. And we think that one of the big problems in the system is the confidentiality. All of this is allowed to go on behind closed doors. The public doesn't know about the depth and nature of these problems because they don't get to see it. And therefore, there's no public pressure to change it. And I think even legislators sometimes are not aware of really the extent of these problems. And so it bothers us a little bit that some of these studies that are going on are sort of going on behind those same closed doors.
Thank you, Chris. Governor, I'm sure you want to respond. What are some of those troubling signs from your perspective?
Well, I think just the signs that Chris mentioned are what we're trying to address issues, but the problem still is going on as we're getting to the point of making some suggestions. One of the things that I would say is that as the studies and as the groups have been meeting, there have been a number of public meetings that have brought together people from all different walks of life who have spoken to these issues, but once the solutions or the proposed solutions are out there, that's when they're going to be a variety. We have to have a whole number of public meetings to let people start to talk about these. Are these good ideas or bad ideas? Because they're going to take a public will to get behind to make them happen. What's being said here is absolutely right. Until those who are in a position to affect policy understand just how important these changes are, how much they're needed, how bad the problem is, they're not going to be willing to step up to the plate to actually make it possible for us to do them. And so what we need to do is have full discussion. When we have some proposals out there, let people look at them and understand how we got to them, why they're being recommended, and what better ideas they have. Because that's, at the end of the day, what's going to make a difference. And we're doing everything we can, but it's incremental, it's slow. We're dealing with problems, all of us, not just from 4 years ago or 8 years ago. These are problems that have been building up now for a number of years. It's going to take us some time to solve them, but we better start now or we're going to be living with them for the next 100 years, and we can't afford that.
Now it's your turn, the members of the audience who have questions for our guests, who want to add anything to what we had to say, who want to make any kind of comment whatsoever about what's going on here. Raise your hand if you want to be, let's start right here. Let's start with the young lady and you're next.
If the guns are so dangerous towards us, why aren't they illegal?
Want me to handle it?
If guns are so dangerous,
we have, in fact, very strong handgun laws in this state, and as you know, an assault weapon ban in this state. The problem is that we can do a lot in this state. If it isn't national, it doesn't have the impact that it needs, because people can just go across state lines and pick up guns. And one of the things that we need to see are things like the Brady Bill. You need to see something that brings some uniformity across the nation. But on the other side of that, I would also say that that alone isn't going to solve the problem. I think there isn't a person in this country who, if they thought just taking guns away was going to solve the crime problem, wouldn't move in that direction. We have got to affect behavior, too. We have got to affect, it's the people behind the guns as well. Guns make it easier for the violence to be worse, for the damage to be worse. You're not hitting with fists. You're not going with knives. You can kill a person much more quickly and from a longer distance, which makes it easier to do. So we have to address that. But we also have to get behind the violence from within that leads you to want to strike out in any way, shape, or form. But we have some good laws here in New Jersey. We need to see more at the national level.
I've been to 17 funerals in the last 2.5 years with kids under the age of 25. And I'm here to say to you as a testament, you know, just a couple weeks ago, you heard about the Back Home situation where 4 young people in the city of Elizabeth, where I reside, died in the wake of violence. And this is only a stimulus of what's happening because of the lack of respect among our young people, the neglect from people in power, and the lack of opportunity for us to be protected. We need to protect our young people, but first of all, we must first respect them. They're gonna take people not just to talk about it, but deal with it on the front line level, going on the street corners and say, yo, brother, what's happening? We need to deal with this. You know what I'm saying? We need to deal with it in the language they understand. This is what it's all about, Governor, and this is what we have to begin to start doing. Thank you.
I was wondering, because of certain family situations that are set in our society today, I was wondering if there's any way that you can teach values instead of the students learning violence. I was wondering if you can teach values such as respect, self-respect, and tolerance in the schools, especially in the grammar schools.
The schools do have a responsibility to teach what's acceptable, what's right, and what isn't right in the broadest sense. But when you start saying the values, it becomes, then you start to get to a situation where it gets very controversial as to whose values you're following. What we ought to be doing is saying that everyone has a value, everyone has a right to be heard, everyone needs to be respected, and we need to give the individuals and the families the tools they need to be able to stay together, to work together, and to make the kind of difference that will be represented in the schools.
I'd like to answer that too, and real quickly, by saying to add on to the difficulty of this, but to really be specific, conflict resolution should be taught from birth. And it should be taught to the mother and father of the child before it's born, so that the father doesn't hit the mother when the child is in the womb, because that has a direct impact on all of this also. So it starts from before the child is born in what we consider to be a very difficult health problem. Conflict resolution is not about values, it's about how to deal with differences in opinions and feelings. That has to be taught from preschool, in the school system from preschool all the way through college, and when you're out of college, you should still have to go. Because obviously that is the problem. Our tolerance is non-existent, and our conflicts are being dealt with in a very violent action. And that's what I think the biggest problem is.
Governor, we know you have another engagement and you do have to go, but we appreciate very much you being here with us, taking the time to be here with us. It's very important for all these people to see someone like you interested in their concerned about their problem and about their lives. So it's very important, and I thank you very much for taking the time. And I'm sure you all want to thank the governor for being here.
Thank you.
Since the 1980s, there has been a rise in teen crime and gangs, both at the local and national level. According to the State Commission of Investigation, New Jersey has over 700 gangs.
One gang is too many, but 700 is definitely too many gangs. Stop the violence.
Hammer!
Word up, stop the violence. It's extremely important that we stop this nonsense. I mean, it gets us nowhere. We really need to be in harmony with each other, because the bottom line is that we all have to live together to make it happen.
Nationally, female gang members are expected to rise 500% in the next 6 years. They were almost non-existent 3 years ago.
Real quick, I want to just ask this question and make a comment. How many of us in here have fired weapons, handled weapons, shot at, or been shot at? Shot at someone or been shot at by somebody? Okay. All right. Well, it's real interesting, and I say this not to embarrass the person, because they know who they are. But we overheard a conversation. We were in the makeup room, and someone came in and said that they were talking to these two women, and these young ladies, and one had a brand new coat on, and was saying, "Don't anybody get near my coat because I don't want them to touch it." And they said, I'm also carrying today. So for that individual who's carrying in the audience, hopefully you'll take back what you're hearing today and think about not bringing a weapon around. So I'm not going to single out, I don't know who it is. I'm not going to ask the person to stand up and identify themselves, but I'm going to ask you hopefully to think a little bit about what you're hearing today and put that gun down and think about making the right choices.
Mensaje que yo le doy a ustedes, a toda esa juventud y a todas esas muchachitas afuera.
The message that I want to send to young women carrying guns is stop. It's no good for you. My name is Maria Witherspoon. I'm in Goldwater Memorial Hospital. I am a victim of a .38 caliber pistol. My friend shot me with my own gun. I don't want to see you in the same condition, paralyzed and in a wheelchair. Stop using guns and drugs.
In New Jersey alone, on the average, there's 500 gun-related deaths a year. And each one of those deaths costs in the way of health care dollars $325,000. My addition, if I remember correctly, is about $175 million just for those deaths, not including the injuries. So you're looking for, why isn't more done here in the city? Why isn't more done in the state? The governor and the mayor, they want to do more, but the money is being wasted on all this other stuff. All right? If you want to know what happens in the emergency room and in the operating room, we're all one color. It's red. There's blood all over. It's not fun. All right? You want to do something right now. It's very simple. Don't pick up the gun. Don't pick up the knife. Don't pick up the weapon.
You can't prune a tree once it's old and then grown up. By then the roots are drowned and the tree has died. You have to start when the child is young. When the child is a baby, teach that child not to cuss out of grown up. Teach that child to respect itself. Teach that child what's right, what's wrong. I see a lot of kids out in the street, they don't care about, repeating what they heard. If you're going, if you're going to tell somebody don't do it, if you tell me don't cuss, don't drink, I have to first see you be first partaker. You have to do what you tell me don't do. If you don't want me to drink, then you don't drink. You don't want me to drop out of school, then you stay in school and further your education. So I think that if you want somebody to do it, you have to start when the child is young. You can't wait till they're grown up, then expect them to change their whole lifestyle. All they know is what they're taught.
A lot of students are not learning enough about the issues that we're talking about today, and I think it should be taught more in the schools, especially in grammar school, because the children in gangs are becoming younger and younger each day, and the violence are showing in students that are getting younger. My little sister, she's becoming very violent, and I think if it was taught more in the schools when we were younger, the problems that we might have today would not be today.
Basically, the tools that we learned when we were young, they're not taught today. Tools such as having integrity, having pride for yourself, being honest, those tools aren't taught today. And I would just like to speak and tell the young brothers and sisters out here that we got to start having pride for ourselves, having pride for the next, show much integrity, be honest with your lover, be honest with yourself, be honest with the next, and have, have feelings for each other.
Take the time to get to know not only your people, but other people too. It ain't gonna be no tomorrow for the people for you to get to know, because we just gonna be gone. Because look at it now, we killing off each other like it's a game. People buying guns like you could go in the store and buy candy. Come on now, you gotta take a look at it.
Well, I feel as though if y'all trying to stop all this black crime, won't y'all get all them rappers off of TV saying all that negative stuff? I believe we need to stop the violence in television and everything, because yesterday I saw a TV commercial where Sega Genesis was making a new game, and it was a little baby doll sitting out in the middle of a desert, and a Uzi or some kind of missile was targeted on her, and right before the missile hit her, she said, "Mommy." this is a game. I mean, our young kids is going out to arcades playing games that has to do with a lot of violence. I believe that really has a lot to do with things too.
For me, the violence is from the media, you know, because where I come from, the high school that I am, that any little fight that happens in the school is all over the paper, you know, because every positive thing that we do, they don't acknowledge. But every little fight or whatever is just blown out of proportion.
Let me say something real quick, Miguel. One of the things that I've learned through this is that the media gives to the consumer what the consumer wants. It's sad, but we as a culture and a society have bred this behavior amongst the media. When there's a reason why they've made Rambos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 15, 89. Same with Halloweens. All the Halloweens and all of these films that keep on coming out on that situation. It's because all of us go to see them and all of us partake in it. If you don't want to see violence on television, you don't want to see violence in your newspapers, then don't pick up the newspaper, don't buy the newspaper, tell them to give it back to them. Don't look at the television, turn it off. In other words, you have to start telling them and boycott the people who do commercial advertising on that situation. It's so basically simple. It's up to the consumer to take hold of that situation. And don't forget that you can write. If you can write it to that person who's putting it out and make sure that they understand what you're talking about. They get enough letters, they start to really worry about it.
We have to get our family morals back. We have to get the families back together. We have to let the mothers and the fathers, you got to be responsible when your kid on the street at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. You have to, when your kid fell, not badger them and tell them that they're not going to be nothing, because they might just grow up not to be nothing, and you might be getting what you wish for. So you got to tell your kids that they're not a failure. Because you fell don't mean that you're a failure. And if you fall down, get up. You always can get up. And we have to institute more programs within the inner city, because I'm from Newark, New Jersey, and we have to institute more programs for the inner city kids, because they got to start carjacking and doing donuts. We be right in church having service, and they right outside our church doing donuts. We have to go out on the street corners and come off our high horses and stop acting like we too proud and go out there and do something. And we got to stand up for what we believe and get back our neighborhoods and get back our young people, because if we losing a whole generation, if we lose a whole generation, we're going to lose a whole generation of young people. Thank you.
There's been a lot of discussion today about problems with violence in the city, in the projects, inner city problems. I come from a community in a suburban area, and I just hope that everyone is aware that violence and drugs is not just a problem amongst problem families, you know, one-parent families in the city. Just last month, I think, there was a case where there was a drug bust in a middle school. These are kids who are like 12 years old, 13 years old, and they were caught in the possession of drugs. Violence and drugs and problems that affect youth no matter where they are. And it's important that we remember that, and we remember everyone.
We're always talking about stop the violence, the gun violence. And I think most teenagers who involved in the violence, they use drugs. Why are we not talking about the drugs and at the same time we try to stop the gun violence?
I couldn't be there, but I want to answer what the guy said as far as we're talking about violence and not about drugs, and we should be talking about drugs. My name is David Gwynn. I'm 27 years old. I was shot by a drug dealer 1 year ago, day after my 26th birthday. Some guy comes on the block and starts shooting after another drug dealer. See what I'm saying? Drug dealer. I could have got away, but instead I used my body to protect a 16-year-old boy from getting shot. Just remember the word, I'm emphasizing the word drugs. Drugs and violence. Drugs and violence. It's all one and the same. You cannot separate one from the other because it all leads up to the same thing. It derives from violence. Drugs derive from violence. Teens and guns derive from violence. If you're young and you're selling drugs, eventually you're going to have a gun. Eventually you're going to have violence around you. What you have to do is learn to stay away from it. Choose your friends and choose your own destiny.
See, I'm a minority male.
I'm in school, I don't have a prison record, and I'm college bound. If statistics prove to be correct, I'm an endangered species. I'm soon to be extinct. And now, like the governor has said, gun violence is the major cause of death by, African-American males. In our schools, the desire to stay alive has to compete with the desire to learn.
The educational process in America, I believe, has to be reformed so that the entirety of the American public, whether it's Hispanic, black, or whatever, is incorporated into it. So therefore, those children in that system begin to love their own selves. Then they're not quick to kill one another. They're not quick to kill others. Thank you so much.
I firmly believe in everything that was said right now, to the point of even saying that instead of changing the history, we have to augment our history. We have to use the word augmentation, because every time we use the word change or rearrange, or people start to fidget, they start to squirm. But augmentation of the history that we have, okay, the history we have, let it continue, but let's augment it. Let's add to it. Let's add to it the incredible array of diversity that has made up the planet, which is now all of the cultures are found today in the United States of America, and how they've all helped to make this place what it is today. Go ahead.
Yes, I had to agree with the brother down there what he said about the activities here in, well, we could say Trenton, that's where I'm from. We do need more activities and to educate our youth on the violence instead of just going out there and saying this person killed this person or whatever. If we have more activities do like community projects, or I'm not saying everyone to get involved with them, maybe a lot of youth would be off the streets instead of being in the streets and doing nothing at all.
Just agreed. How old are you?
I'm 18.
18. He's talking about the city of Trenton and about the activities, and we have the mayor right here. We cannot miss this opportunity. What activities are there, and what does the city of Trenton offer the youth to keep them off the streets?
I'll tell you, there's certainly not enough. We have our weed and seed programs, our schools are open, but certainly not enough. We have mentor programs and these things. But I think what's really important is that we really need to come together with a Congress of young people in the city. Government can't do it all. Politicians can't. It has to come from all of us. All of us have a role to play. Government has a role, the church has a role, and everyone has a role to help and reach somebody else.
Individualism is a problem. It can be good for a person in prosperity with what they want to do as far as their life is concerned. But when it comes down to dealing with her, him, the next man, you have to try to want something for them. You can't just say, well, this is my life, I'm going to do it. Because in our neighborhoods, in your cities, you grow up, you say, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get my grades. I'm going to go to work, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to get mine, I'm going to get mine, and that causes a problem. Because a lot of times, if you don't have the mental and spiritual and the home atmosphere to do yours the right way, you'll take another's.
How old are you?
I'm 18.
I got one over here.
Well, first I'd like to say that Governor Whitman spoke about each of us finding a purpose in our lives, and Mr. Olmos, I agree with the fact that he said that we are dealing with a disease in America today, and we're dealing with the disease of hopelessness, we're dealing with the disease of lack of guidance and a lack of spiritual direction, which gives us moral standards and things and expectations that we should expect from each other in society. And when we have these lack of things, we have a downfall in our moral standards and expectations of what we want from our young people. And I think we need to raise our expectations, and young people don't just wake up one morning and say that I have a purpose, but it's up to adults to take young people by the hand and notice the things that make them great and help them find their purposes. And that is what is going to help us.
I came from a family with two alcoholic parents who used to beat it into me that you're no good and you're not going to amount to very much. And I ended up in a California lockup as a result of an armed robbery conviction for my own heroin addiction and my alcoholism. And I've never seen a group of kids get together when drinking breaks out, that a fight doesn't break out. That's what happened in Elizabeth. That's what caused that to happen. I'm not saying that alcohol and drugs cause all the violence, but the demand for these substances bring out guns, bring out people, and the worst in folks.
We've poured millions and millions and millions of dollars into programs like AA and activities that are trying to stop those who are already involved in the use of drug and alcohols, and we're finding that those kinds of things don't work. What is going to work is the reverse end. When there is no demand, there will be no supply. And so we have to take kids at a young age and teach them the value of living clean and wholesome lives. And the parent's responsibility and role in this partnership is that the parent refrains from drinking in their home in order to show this kid their participation in trying to help this young boy or this young girl do something with their lives.
When you were making your movie, you were working with a lot of kids that knew only violence. Were you scared that some of those scenes may have come reality?
Yeah, we were. A lot of the time was spent trying to understand the environment that we were working in. A lot of the gangs that worked with us were part of the gangs that were in the streets that we were working in. They called a truce. They made us sure that we understood what the conditions were on the street, and they did take care of us. And yeah, we took a lot of precautions to make sure that we understood what was going on in the streets that we were working in. Thank you for the concern.
Mr. Haro, in your movie, we see a young teenager, young man, praying that he doesn't die that day. Has joining a gang changed these people's perception of life, life's worth?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that Capone, who we saw in the film, you saw him in prison, which he eventually got out, and we were able to get him, speaking about a mentoring program, we were able to get him into a master chef training program. So he makes French pastry now, he's an expert at it. But recently, he was returning from work to home about 1 o'clock in the morning. He stepped off the bus and he was shot. There was a car that was following him and shot him 14 times with a 9mm. And up close, boom, boom, boom. Believe it or not, he survived. And he said as he was laying out on the street bleeding out, there are a number of things. One, his homies weren't around him. They all split. You know, they weren't anywhere. He was just bleeding out himself. And he remembers crying out to God. The other thing, the most significant thing that reached him was that he realized that it was going to stop right there. Whether he was going to be alive or not, he didn't know at that moment. But he said, I made the decision that if I got out of this, that I was not going to retaliate. And he knew who it was.
Well, I'm going to tell you about friends. My friends, they was there for a little while, but after a while they leave you. You know, they don't come around like they used to. Like when you was out on the street, you know, they always was there, but when you get shot or in the hospital, they don't be there for long. So if y'all thinking friends are gonna be around, family's there, always gonna be there. Like my mother, she's always told me, you know, don't hang. You're hanging with the wrong group. And my friends was always, you know, around when I was walking, but once I got shot, my mom was the only one there for me, you know, my family, you know, so basically that's what I want to say is friends ain't always around for you, you know, so if you thinking they're going to be there for you, think again.
What we see at Goldwater, we try and rehabilitate and send back to the community what's left of the body that the bullets take away. And what's scary to me is there's always a flow. There's an ebb and a flow. We have new members going to the community, and we have new members coming in from the streets. And they're getting younger and younger. Nestor was 20 years old when he was shot. We have a member, Eddie Matos, who was 16 when he was shot. He's a quadriplegic now on a ventilator. At 16 years old, this is the rest of his life. He'll be in a hospital bed, or he'll be on a ventilator or life support for the rest of his life.
I have a question. Why, if somebody don't like somebody else, why do they feel they have to hurt, harm, or kill that other person?
You answer that because this is your goodbye, Mr. Olmos, please.
I can honestly tell you that's one of the things we've been discussing here today. For me, it's very difficult to understand that problem. That's what all of us are trying to find out. Why people have to take a violent reaction towards confrontation and not learn that violent reaction only breeds. I learned one thing from Gandhi, which is really a beautiful saying. It was asked of him, you know, well, what do you think of revenge? You know, it's talked about in the Bible. And Gandhi said, an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. So it became that simple. Thank you for your question.
I have to thank you, Mr. Olmos, thank Governor Whitman, thank all of our guests, our invited guests on the front row for being with us, thank our studio audience for your participation. Our message today is a very strong one for all of you. Thank you for being with us.
1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, come on, y'all, stop the violence. Come on, y'all, stand up. Stop the violence. Come on, stop the violence. Come on, stop the violence. I hear you talking trash, that's why I had to ask. Why you blast that man for his hard work cash? Get your kind of twice, walk around with your knife, put you in school with books, then I bet you wouldn't fight. Tell me why, is it why we there? That you got to get shot for the color you wear. And not only in the ghetto, it's always this way, cause crime is even real up in Beverly Hills. You need to chill, stand still at that point to kill. Get a life and then feel something realer than real. Tell me why you pull the trigger, it makes you feel bigger. I think you're really stupid and you're foolish like Hitler. Man, you need to stop and think about what you're doing. Who get you killing and what you really proving. You can steal like that, then return it like that. But when you take a person's life, they don't give it back. And be a cold day in December that you'll remember when you pull the trigger cause you couldn't control the temper. No more staying quiet, it's time to stop the violence. Time to walk straight and erase all the riots. Man, you need to check yourself, then respect yourself before you wreck yourself. Word.